And thank you very much to all the devotees today for giving me an opportunity to have your wonderful association. It was not planned that I should be here actually for this Sangha. Lakshmimani Prabhu in January when she was in Singapore mentioned to me that you should come for this. And I just said that, okay, fine, I'll think about it. I never confirmed anything. I never said anything else more than that. And then one fine day, one devotee from Canada sent me a flyer saying that, oh, I didn't know you're coming to Canada. And I told him I didn't know either. I had no idea. And all of a sudden I saw the flyer with pictures of all the esteemed devotee speakers, and then I was there too. And then suddenly I thought, okay, now I just have to fly to Canada. And I was actually in Sydney 3 days ago. So I actually flew from Sydney through Singapore to come to Toronto. All because of Lakshmimani Prabhu. So thank you, Prabhu, for giving me this association. I'm not so well, so I'm not sure. My ears are very blocked because I've been having a bad cold and I've got asthma. So in case I speak too loud, tell me to, slow down, because I really can't hear myself. And I realize it's a very difficult thing when you cannot hear yourself. So please forgive me. I thought it would be good for us to start with Kirtan, because that's a good way to... The most difficult sessions are the sessions after the break and after lunch, and when you have your 1 hour. Even I found it difficult to come out, so it was very difficult for you also. Today's, I had the good fortune of hearing Maharaj in the morning and Raj Vihari Prabhu, and I understood that one of the themes, the major theme here that we are speaking about, is actually also referring to this community that Srila Prabhupada built, and this wonderful community of devotees. Prabhupada built a home actually in which the whole world could live in. And the reason, difficulty. And this difficulty doesn't go. And the more we try in this material world to find material solutions to material problems, the material solutions very often are more difficult and more dangerous than the material problems. I can give you a good example of that. But before that, it's Prahlad Maharaj who says it in 7th canto, 9th chapter, Dukhau Shadam Tadapi Dukkham Atadhyayam Bhuman Vadami Bhavame Tavadasya Yogam. So he says, Dukhau Shadam Tadapi Dukkham Atadhyayam. He says that actually, my Lord, in this material world, the material solutions to the material remedies are very often more problematic than even the remedies. A good example, like I said, was in the year 2000, I fell off my balcony. Yes, I actually fell off my balcony. No one pushed me. Though the police actually suspected my wife in the beginning. But it was New Year's Eve, and this was the second floor, right, of an apartment. And I was cleaning the windows, New Year's Eve, and she was in the kitchen. And while I was cleaning the window at the balcony, as I stretched out, the window was stuck. So I put half my body outside to try and pull it. And then the window gave way. And when it gave way, I fell off too. And I had barely a few seconds to register before I hit the ground. But Krishna was kind. I didn't hit the ground on my back, I hit it on my side. But I broke all my bones here, I broke my ribs. And that was quite amazing. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because that was a material problem. And then the operations begin. And there were 3 operations done for this part of the hand, especially for the nerves that got damaged. And every operation had to resolve the problem that the previous operation had. Because the nerves just got more and more enmeshed with the growing bone that was coming out, or the debris that was inside. So in the end, I actually realized when I was reading the purports of Prahlad Maharaj at that time when I was in the hospital, because my Guru Maharaj told me to read Prahlad Maharaj's prayers and Gajendra's prayers, and that's when I realized that dukkaushadam tadapi dukkham atatyayam. That in this material world, we are all trying to fix problems by trying to turn to material solutions. That doesn't mean, the next question you probably ask me and I'm anticipating is, it doesn't mean that we don't have solutions that we can offer which are material. For example, in Bhagavatam, you'll find that there is the famous episode where the Brahmastra is released by Ashwatthama. And even though he released it and it was coming where Krishna and Arjuna were on the chariot. Ashwatthama was so irresponsible that he did not have the means to counteract it, but he had the means to release it. However, as the Brahmastra was coming, if you read Bhagavatam, you will see that actually Arjuna had the full potency to actually neutralize or counteract the Brahmastra. He had that. But what does he do before that? What he does before that was, he gets off his chariot, and Bhagavatam says he actually performs Achaman. Brahmastra is coming and he has the time to perform Achaman, and then he circumambulates Krishna. And then he chants, Krishna, Krishna Mahabaho, Bhakta Nama Bhayankaraha, Twammeko Dhayyamananam, Apavargosi Samstritehe. And after this he chants 3 other prayers, 4 beautiful prayers. But when he chants to Krishna these prayers, why is he chanting? Despite the fact that he had the great capacity to actually neutralize this Ashwatthama's Brahmastra. He had a solution which was material. He could have dispatched it immediately. But the reason why he came down and he prayed to Krishna was because he understood that the source of his strength, Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho, is actually Krishna. And in 787 of Srimad Bhagavatam also, the same point is given by Prahlad Maharaj. When Hiranyakashipu gets very angry with Prahlad Maharaj towards the end of his time here, he calls Prahlad Maharaj a curved tail of a dog. You know, when you try making a dog's tail straight when it's curved, it just won't happen. So he's saying this Prahlad is just like that. And then he asked Prahlad a very pertinent question. Maybe one of the wisest questions he's ever asked Hiranyakashipu. What is the source of your strength? Right? Very important question. And it's coming from a demon, very, very perceptive. And he asked that question, what is the source of your strength? What makes you so strong? And Prahlad Maharaj says the same thing that Arjuna does in the first canto. And what he does is he says that the source of my strength, my father, is the source of your strength also. And is the source of everybody's strength. So this point is very important. That in this material world, there are many solutions which appear material, that which we can immediately employ. But the difference between the advanced devotees of Bhagavatam and sometimes the struggling devotees that, for example, I face in my own struggle, is this short time difference. Arjuna had the time and the faith and the conviction that no matter how skillful he was, still he was an instrument in the hands of the Lord. Nimitta matra bhavya sabyasachi. He also knew Maya Vaite Nihata Purva Eva. He knew that by Krishna's arrangement, all the persons who were supposed to die on the battlefield were going to die. So he understood this. And that's why he could chant Krishna, Krishna Mahabaho, Bhaktanam Abhayankaraha. He understood that fearlessness doesn't come from our heart on account of our material endeavors. Fearlessness comes into our heart by the strength of our invoking Krishna's strength. When we realize that Krishna is the source of our strength. The moment we realize that and we accept it in our lives, then the expectation that we can solve problems on our own is replaced by the acceptance that Krishna is the source of these remedies eventually. So therefore, Arjuna, after chanting the prayers, then Bhagavatam so nicely describes that he then went on to very successfully neutralize the Brahmastra. It's a very small episode, but so significant. And somewhere in the purport of 8.1.15 or 8.1.19, I can find it later, there is one line where Srila Prabhupada writes, it's really amazing. If one begins one's activity for his satisfaction, in other words, capital H, for Krishna's satisfaction, then one gradually loses taste for material activities. It's an amazing line that Srila Prabhupada gives. If one simply begins one's activities for his satisfaction, then one gradually loses his taste for material activities. And that's a challenge we all have. Because in this material world, there's so much taste for material activities, even now. And very often we want to come to the point where we have genuine taste for devotional service. But we don't realize that the great acharyas and the great devotees in Bhagavatam showed us that. They began their activities by invoking Krishna, because they knew Krishna is the source of their strength. They knew that without Krishna, there would be no life. Tava kathamritam tapta jivanam kavibiriditam kalmasapaham shravana mangalam shrimadattatam bhuvi granantiye bhuride janaha. The gopis sing so beautifully that Krishna, anything that is to do with you, any katha, it is amrit, it is nectar. And just as important as that is the word tapta jivanam. Tapta jivanam is so nicely translated as the source of sustenance, that which sustains. So the gopis sustain their lives based on their dependence on Krishna. Arjuna was so successful, he became free of despondence and dejection and difficulty because he was always dependent on Krishna. Chetasaha sarva karmani mayi sanyasamatparaha. Krishna tells us in 1856 or 57 of Bhagavad Gita that just depend upon me. That's what he says. And if one depends upon him, then in the next shloka, Krishna says, Mad prasadat tarisyasi. Whatever challenges or obstacles that you face, by my mercy, you will be able to cross. So I'm framing this because the topic today is a very interesting topic. It comes from the pages of Bhagavatam. There are 11 causes of dejection that actually Bhagavatam presents in a question, in a series of questions that Yudhishthira Maharaj asked Arjuna. If you recall this is in the first canto of the 14th chapter. And in this 14th chapter, I'll just bring it down here. In the 14th chapter, you find that, or just before that, as the 14th chapter starts, just to frame it, you all know that Arjuna had actually gone for a few months because he wanted to see Krishna in Dwarka, right? So when he went to see Krishna in Dwarka, Yudhishthira Maharaj was still waiting for him in Hastinapur. While he was still there, many months passed, Bhagavatam tells us. And despite many months passing, there was no sign, no sight, no sound of Arjuna. There were no WhatsApps in those days. There were no forms of social media. So he couldn't just give him a call and say, what's up? Instead, he had to wait. There was no messages coming even. So it became a source of anxiety for Yudhishthira Maharaj. At the same time, Bhagavatam tells us, Yudhishthira Maharaj also began to see very inauspicious signs that were happening around his kingdom. He saw jackals spitting fire, for example. He saw that on the ground, the citizens of his kingdom were starting to fight. Husbands and wives were having quarrels. He found that relationships between different living entities in different parts of his kingdom were becoming strained. He found that everywhere there were many, many inauspicious signs that to him signaled that actually Krishna had departed from this world. But Yudhishthira Maharaj did not want to confirm anything as yet. And so he waited and waited. And while he was waiting and thinking where was Arjuna, finally after 7 months, Bhagavatam tells us Arjuna came back from Dwarka. And when he came back to Dwarka, Yudhishthira Maharaj saw that he was very dejected and very despondent. Bhagavatam describes his despondence as tears coming from his eyes. He was always looking down and he was looking very dejected. So Yudhishthira Maharaj then begins a series of questions first. But interestingly, those series of questions are questions about Dwarka. He first begins to ask about how's everyone in Dwarka, and he describes everyone, Ugrasena, he describes Vasudev, he describes all the inhabitants, all his friends, all his associates. And after asking all of that, he did not receive any answer yet from Arjuna. But then at that point of time, Yudhishthira Maharaj begins to look carefully at Arjuna. And when he realizes that Arjuna himself is looking very dejected, then his questions become personal. And then he concentrates on Arjuna's welfare. And then he begins to ask the questions, right? So this is the framing. Now, the questions that he will ask are very interesting. And today is meant for us to just think about them, take them back. And maybe as I raise each question, feel free to step in and say something about them if you feel that it's not been adequately covered, or there's something I may have missed. But one thing I do want to say from the very beginning is that this state of dejection and despondence is not something new to us. Even as devotees, we find that we are faced with this challenge every time. In my service as general counsel, as I was introduced, and in my capacity as a lawyer for 30 years, my day begins with problems, and my day ends with problems. And 90% of the time it's not my problem. But by the end of the day, all these problems have become my problem. Of course, in my material duties, I'm well paid. In ISKCON, that doesn't happen. And therefore, the problems are worse, actually, because they're free, and they're put on my head. But the point is, everyone who has a problem, even within our society, the reality is that they face dejection, they face despondence, and sometimes they face so much a feeling of being downcast, discouraged, and even hopeless. Now, these feelings can arise from events, they can arise from your circumstances. Sometimes they can come because of a loss of something precious. I've seen devotees become dejected, not because they lost money or they lost property, but maybe they lost a service that mattered very much to them for years. And for some reason that service was no longer there. And they found that they identified their life and existence based on that. And they become very sad about it. I've seen devotees have problems with health, for example, because of the stress of an issue. And it dilapidates them. It makes it very difficult. So the loss of anything which is precious or meaningful, even in Krishna consciousness, is a continuous struggle actually. And this can happen every day. And whenever we think that some happiness is going to come, then Prahlad Maharaj's verse is very important. Dukkaushadam tadapi dukkham atatyayam. The material solutions can very often be just as bad, if not worse, than the material problems. So, this is a tale of dejection. It's not meant to bring us all down, don't feel so bad, but it's very useful for us to think about it. I went through this as a beginning. I did tell you that Maharaj Yudhishthira observed signs that the Lord had disappeared from the world. And later, he also inquired about the inhabitants of Dwarka from Arjuna. But look at the purport of 1.439. In 1.439, this is the part that's very important. Yudhishthira Maharaj moved from the general feelings of inquiry that he had to the personal inquiry that he put forward to Arjuna. Why is this significant? This is significant because while we all may face problems, and while as a community we have the duty to take care of each other and serve each other, very often the problems will be addressed when we actually become personal with each other. That is very important. And for us to be personal with each other, to be able to share a problem with each other, there must be a relationship. A relationship is like a ship, right? Without a ship, nothing can actually float, nothing can move, especially across a vast ocean of difficulty. So a relationship is so much important. And today I think what Vaishnava Prabhu said about being able to reveal in confidence the challenges we have, the things that we have on our mind, that's the first starting point actually of getting across these difficulties. And that's why Yudhishthira Maharaj displays what a great Vaishnava he is. Because even though he was so concerned about Dwarka, and for him Arjuna was to be the messenger of Dwarka, but he was perceptive enough to realize that there were physical changes to Arjuna. And then he wanted to ask him, Arjuna, are you all right? And sometimes in a community, When someone comes up to us whom we have a relationship with, or who have always been congenial to us, if they come to us and ask, Prabhu, are you all right? How are things with you? And they ask it genuinely, it is really Krishna's blessings. Because at that moment, we know that we have the ability to connect with someone. And that can really help us in a difficult time. And that is actually the hand of Krishna. Because Krishna doesn't only work through himself, but he always works through the agency of his devotees. So this point about 1:4:39 was the turning point. Because then, from then on, from the verses 39 to 44, when you have time and you go back, you should read how very nicely these questions are asked. So today, let's just look at them from a higher angle, because we won't have so much time, and I'm aware of the time running. But we'll do it and see what we can do. The first thing that that Yudhishthira Maharaj asked Arjuna was actually about his health. He said, my brother Arjuna, please tell me whether your health is all right. And why does he ask that? Because he's looking at him and he says, you appear to have lost your bodily luster. In Sanskrit, sometimes we call it tejas. Sometimes when devotees are very happy and when our sadhana is very nice, the sadhana shows in the tejas. It shows in the effulgence of the person. That's why in devotional service you can see persons being older. They may be much more older than those who are younger, so to speak, but their effulgence makes them very, very radiating. And that's what Arjuna was being asked, because Arjuna should have been with Krishna all this time. So why did he lose his bodily luster? This was the question that Yudhishthira Maharaj was having. And then he asked the second question. So in this particular verse, there are two questions being asked. The first is the challenge of health. And the second after that is whether anyone had disrespected or neglected you. So let's look at health first, right? In 1-10 of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very famous verse, very nicely Shukadeva Goswami frames this point to us. He makes it clear to us that our desires should not be directed to sense gratification. But there's an important caveat, that if one should desire, then we should desire a healthy life. Why? Because health is really very important for Krishna consciousness. I think in the pioneering years of this movement, when you hear devotees speak about the amount of time and the amount of energy that they sacrifice and the health challenges that they faced after that, you'll realize that many of these devotees tolerated so many difficulties and even their health challenges just to push forward Srila Prabhupada's movement. But at the same time, Prabhupada, if you read his writings, his letters, he was always concerned if devotees or his disciples, if their health was not good. Prabhupada would write to them, would sometimes ask them in Lilamrita, how is he doing or how is she doing? And he would prescribe or suggest some remedies that they should take. Prabhupada was not oblivious to the fact that you should be transcendental to health issues because you're not this body. Prabhupada was never artificial about that. So what Yudhishthira Maharaj is asking is a very practical thing. And that is why taking care of our health is actually a very important part of our service to the community. And not only should we be responsible for our own health, but we should also be able to be there for those whose health are not capable of being taken care of. Which is why in a community, taking care of elders, looking after them, seeing to their needs is such an important part of a community. And because ISKCON is so young, but the devotees are getting old, you'll find that this is very new to many of us also. Have we made provisions which are adequate for the older devotees so that their health and their challenges in later life are being adequately taken care of? Most often than not, it's not there. It could be better, but we're still a long way away from that. But different communities have different ways of dealing with this. In Singapore, for example, we have a team of devotees that have planned programs for devotees who are senior so that they don't come during a Saturday feast crowd and fear of being crushed and rushed too much. So we have festivals that are only meant for senior devotees, and they actually come They get to do darshan, they get to do everything that they will do just in their own space. And many of them feel, for example now, they feel much better because they feel that they can actually come to the center and they don't feel that they would have to navigate their way through crowds or find it difficult to come. So sometimes communities should take some measures to do that. And I think it's important for the leadership to look to that, because this is the first question that Yudhishthira Maharaj asked Arjuna. Apart from that, Yudhishthira Maharaj also asked about the healthy body. But we also know that very often, and it's my experience too, and I think it's many people's experience, you can take the best medicines in the world, you can be prescribing, making sure your health is very fine, and one day, without knowing it, you could just get a heart attack. It's happened before, it probably happened again. There are people who are walking time bombs and we don't know it. And that is why at the end of the day, health is also a gift from Krishna. And we should be grateful to Krishna if our health is good. And the best way to offer that gratitude to Krishna is in good health, use our time well for Krishna. Because those who use their time well for Krishna, Krishna will always protect them. And this is very true of all devotees in their experiences. Another thing that's very important about good health is that very often good health also comes from a peaceful mind. A disturbed mind is very often the starting point of a disturbed health. And I'm a very good example of that. The more problems that come to my plate, the more my health goes south. It's a direct correlation. And the reason is, this mind which is uncontrolled is the beginning challenge for the whole body. Ayurveda very clearly says that the moment the mind is disturbed, the body's symptoms is that it will show that disturbance and it will break down. Which is why when we meet devotees in our community and we find if their health is not good, it's also meaningful for us to sit down and spend time with them to understand if we can do something for their health, or is it because they have something in mind which has been troubling them for a while. And in my experience, that has always been the case. It's a starting point, actually. The other thing that I really like is a beautiful verse that King Rahugana was given by Jadabharat in the 5th canto, 11th chapter, 17th verse. This chapter is the shortest chapter in whole Bhagavatam. It only has 17 verses. And the 17th verse is an amazing verse. And if you ever want to study anything and everything about the mind, then just study the 11th chapter of the 5th canto. Because every verse there is descriptive of the power and the jurisdiction of the mind, so to speak. And it culminates in Jadabharat speaking this point. Brata vyamenam tadabhadra viryam upeksheya adhyeditam apramattaha Guro harihi charanapashanastro jahi vyalikam swayamatma mosham. The translation is very nice. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. So actually, the greatest enemy is not the person sitting next to us, or the person who's denied us service, or the person who's giving us trouble day and night. The real greatest enemy is actually the uncontrolled mind. This is the same thing actually in 789 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj tells Hiranyakashipu the same thing. He said, "Oh Father, actually there is no greater enemy, there is no enemy in the world other than the uncontrolled mind." And therefore the same thing is given here. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. And then Jadabharat says, the mind is not factual, but it is very strong. And he says the only way to conquer this mind is actually two things. The weapon of service. Service to who? Service to the spiritual master and the devotees. And second, service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he ends it with a great warning. Do this with great care. Great care. So therefore, the first point that actually Arjuna is being asked is very important. Is your body alright? But a healthy body includes a healthy mind. And that is something very important to us. In the second part of the first shloka, he actually also asked this question. Is it because your health has been affected? Because others are disrespecting you or neglecting you? Why? Because of your long stay in Dwarka. The good thing about coming for 3 days in Canada and leaving is that you don't overstay your welcome. Right? So long stays are sometimes difficult because when you overstay, we have a saying, you overstay your welcome. So actually Yudhishthira Maharaj was very perceptive. He said, did you stay too long in Dwarka? Was that why everyone took you for granted? That's what happens to us very often. Sometimes you see a devotee who's been doing so much service, he or she is there day in, day out, and it's so easy for us to think they have become furniture. Because we almost always expect them just to be there. We know the prasadam will be done, we know the pujari will be there, but when we do that, we don't realize that we're actually disrespecting them. And actually, we are neglecting their great service. And this can also be a great source of dejection, because everyone wants to feel appreciated. And appreciating devotees is part of our Vaishnava etiquette. And the less we appreciate devotees, the more they will feel dejected, and the less satisfied and happy we will also be. Because after a while, when we take for granted devotees who are precious to Krishna, how can we be happy eventually? Durvasa Muni took for granted the greatness of Ambarish Maharaj. And look what happened to him. He spent a year running all over the world, not because he was particularly fond of touring, but because he was being chased. And he thought his philosophy was absolutely correct because he ended up in Vaikuntha. But he was told he was wrong in any way. He had to come back again. He had to fall at the lotus feet of the devotee. Why? Because he neglected him and he disrespected him. That's a very important point. And therefore, disrespect and neglect both ways will cause both parties dejection. And if we actually disrespect and neglect someone, not only is it an aparad in terms of Vaishnava etiquette, but if we even neglect a living entity, then let us not forget that Krishna is in the heart of every living entity. If you look at Srila Prabhupada's life, Srila Prabhupada did not neglect anyone. Nobody was neglected by Srila Prabhupada. And if we can only imbibe that mood, then disrespecting or neglecting someone will be a thing of the past actually. So therefore, the importance of offering respect, devoid of a sense of false prestige, is very much part of our Vaishnava culture. Sometimes we don't offer respect to others because we feel we are superior to them. And that sense of false prestige prevents us from actually offering that. We also disrespect others because, if you think about it, we sincerely think we're going to be here forever. And we don't realize that our actions will have consequences. We don't realize that every action that we're doing is going to have consequences. And as long as we are in this world, our mood should be to respect others. Sometimes we are also disrespecting of others, not because we want to deliberately disrespect them, but also because we are very self-absorbed in our own issues. Sometimes have you met devotees who actually are so self-absorbed in their issues that they forget that other people also have problems? It can happen. Sometimes even amongst family members, my life is a tragedy. Sometimes when we meet each other, instead of talking about Krishna, we speak about how much I've suffered. And then you try to tell me how much you have suffered more than me. And then I will try to append you by telling you that, before that I suffered more than you. And we just continue this talk of suffering because actually we just want to show someone how much we are suffering. But the truth of the matter is, because we are so self-absorbed in this, it's very difficult for us to see other persons suffering. And that's why this question of disrespect and neglect is so important. There is a verse, 1:1848 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tiraskrita Vipralabdha, Shabda Shipta Hata Api. In that verse, Shukadeva Goswami says, regarding Parikshit Maharaj, he says that the devotees of the Lord are sometimes killed, sometimes they are cheated, sometimes they can be criticized, sometimes they are defamed, and sometimes they are neglected. This neglect is very painful. If you are angry with someone, it's better if you just tell them you're angry. But if you give someone the cold turkey treatment, Or if you just tell everybody, okay, now we'll just avoid this devotee, it's actually more horrifying, because being neglected is a very painful affair. And by the way, neglect is also a crime in the eyes of the law. So just to tell you that. Sense control, therefore, is very important. Why? Because when we control our senses, then we learn to understand that there are others outside our problems and our lives who also deserve our time, our attention, especially if they are feeling dejected, and especially if they are feeling low or despondent. So yeah, that's the verse that I was telling you about. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. So these are things that devotees can expect. And you see in Bhagavatam that almost every devotee has been an example of all these different kinds of prejudices. These are all causes of dejection in this material world. Then Arjuna was asked in text 40 another question. In this question, he's asked by Yudhishthira Maharaj, has someone addressed you with unfriendly words or threatened you? Then there's another question here. Could you not give charity to one who asked? Or could you not keep your promise to someone? Let's look at the first question that he was asked. The question he was asked is, has someone addressed you with what? With unfriendly words. Imagine coming for this wonderful retreat. It wouldn't be wonderful if you were not greeted friendly in a friendly manner. Maitreya. It wouldn't be wonderful if the devotees around you were not smiling and saying Hare Krishna. Imagine if you walked into a temple and you said Hare Krishna and people looked away. You wouldn't want to go back to the temple again. You wouldn't. So therefore, it's so important that one of the reasons why we become dejected, Bhagavatam tells us, is when unfriendly words are used against us, or when we use unfriendly words against others. We cause them dejection. And it is not just unfriendly words. Sometimes it's threatening, right? If someone threatens you, or if someone is inimical to you, you will feel dejected. You'll feel despondent, especially if you're in the company of devotees. So therefore, this Kali Yuga is full of inimical words. And that's why in Kali Yuga we have so much problems with each other. If I tell you the number of lawsuits that are being filed within ISKCON every day, you probably just fall off your seats. If I tell you the kind of the contents of the lawsuits that are being filed against each other, you would fall off the floor. Because it shows that the basis of all of this is actually people are inimical with each other. And very often, people find ways and means to weaponize words against each other. And that becomes very painful for devotees. That is why in Bhagavatam this phrase is given, Priya Vakya. If we were to speak to each other, then our words should be pleasing. That is such an important point. Truth may be unpalatable, but if it is spoken by one whose heart is pleasing and who does not have anything inimical in their heart, then even if the truth were to seem impalatable, but when spoken by someone with a mood which is not threatening and not unfriendly, that which is unpalatable can still be accepted. This is Bhagavatam. And this is the greatness of how Vidura, for example, could speak to Dhritarashtra in the first canto, 13th chapter. Vidura's words were not unfriendly. Vidura did not even threaten Dhritarashtra. Of course, when you read it in the beginning, when Vidura speaks to Dhritarashtra and tells him strong words, what are you doing as a dog, living off the remains, of a master in the household? Then he tells him this very important thing, Evam Graheshu Saptanam. He says that those who are too materially attached to this world, Atyakramat Avinyataha, time imperceptibly overtakes you. Kalaha Parama Dushtaraha. And when time overtakes you, it takes everything away from you. So these were harsh words that Vidura used, but they were not threatening. Neither were they unfriendly. Why? Because Vidura's heart was never inimical to his brother. His brother had treated him so badly. Dhritarashtra was he silently allowed all the insults that Duryodhana threw at his uncle. To the point where finally Vidura had to put his bow down and he walked away. He walked away, but he never looked back. And Bhagavatam says, even though he was afflicted by the harsh words of Duryodhana, Bhagavatam says, even though he was afflicted, he was not sorry. It's a very important thing. Because devotees have relations with each other, even though we may have to speak words which may appear to be unpalatable, but because the motive behind what we speak is not unpalatable, not threatening, not unfriendly, not inimical, we will not become sources of dejection to others, but we can become sources of inspiration to others. Eventually, Dhritarashtra renounced this world not on the basis of instructions of Vidura, but really on the basis of his love for his brother, which was portrayed through his instructions. So that's why this particular point is so important. Another way of looking at the world, which Bhagavatam offers, is really nice. In 11.737, there is a very beautiful, very simple lesson to be taught. Bhutai akramyamano api, diro thaivo vasadugai, tadvidvan atmano, no, tadvidvan na chale margat, anvasiksham shite vratam. And see the beautiful instructions here. A sober person, even when harassed by other living beings, should understand that his aggressors are acting helplessly under the control of God. And thus he should never be distracted from the progress of his own path. This I have learned from the earth. What's important about this? Two things. One, there will always be harassment from living entities. Then we have to accept it is the nature of the world. If there's no harassment, it is surprising. Then it is very surprising. The harassment can come in many forms. It can come in the form of nature. It can come in the form of living entities who themselves are being harassed by material modes of nature. But Bhagavatam tells us that despite all of this, the most important thing is na chale margat. We should not become deviated from our devotional service. Even though Arjuna was very disturbed by the fact that Krishna had already departed from this material world. And if you hear him in the first canto, 15th chapter, of how he remembers all the wonderful time that he spent with Krishna, all his expressions of his remembrance of Krishna are based on gratitude and loving relationship. And because he remembers it that way, his progress in devotional service is never distracted, even though so many harassing elements are present after the departure of Krishna. But Arjuna, because he could remember the instructions of the Lord, he became peaceful after remembering Krishna's pastimes. And that is an instruction that we can use. And this is a very important point, because unfriendly words will always be there. But as devotees in a community, it becomes so important for each of us to be responsible for how we speak, for in what mood we speak, and in what mood we act. This is the lesson that is asked by this question. I'm going to go on to the second part of it, and then I'm going to pause. And I'd like to get some reflections. If I can get anything from you, it would be really nice. Now, there's another shloka that's really nice about this. Parikshit Maharaj, in the first canto, 19th chapter, 16th verse, Parikshit Maharaj makes an important prayer. He says that if by any chance I have to come back again to this world, which is a relevant prayer, at least for me, because there's a high chance I'll have to come back again to this world. Now, if I come back again to this world, Bhagavatam is so kind, it gives me a beautiful prayer. Parikshit Maharaj says, you can pray, but you can pray for three things. And this is what he prays. Beautiful. You can chant the shloka. Punascha bhuya bhagavati anante rati prasanga chatarashriyeshu mahatsuyamya upayami shrishtim maitreyastu sarvatra namo vijayabhya. Again, offering obeisances unto all of you brahmanas, I pray that if I should again take my birth in the material world, I will have one, complete attachment to the unlimited Lord Krishna. That's his first prayer. That let me be attached completely to Krishna. His second prayer is very nice. association with his devotees. So this association is so important. And that's why friendly words and non-threatening actions become even more important in a community. And the third point is also very important, something that sometimes we take for granted. Because as devotee communities, we can become isolated. And we can start thinking that my employer or my colleague outside in the office is in Maya. And because he's in Maya, I don't have to be friendly with him. I should be difficult with him, or I should be aloof from him. And therefore, friendly relations with all living beings. That's very important. That's why I'm not surprised, that in Singapore, ISKCON is banned, you see. Because the initial devotees who came to ISKCON, to Singapore in the beginning years, when they came, they came with a lot of zeal. And they were welcomed open-heartedly by the Hindu community. And so they opened up the doors of their temples and invited these devotees to come over. The devotees sat down, and after the first words that they started in their Bhagavatam classes was to condemn all the devatas and the demigods, in whose temple, by the way, they were seated. And they were having a nice program, And that started the end of ISKCON in Singapore. Because of this idea that we are very special and that everyone else really has not made the cut. That's a dangerous assumption to make. And that doesn't help us. And it doesn't help us to bridge the gap with everyone else also. So that's why friendly relations is such an important thing. Prabhupada says one must see Krishna in everyone. We don't have to go and hug a tiger, Prabhupada says that too. But we should maintain friendly relations with living entities who are generally not tigers, right? So that's the importance of friendly relations. Titikshaya karunaya maitriya chakina jantusu samadvena na sarvatma bhagavan samprasidati. Samprasidati means to become satisfied. So Krishna becomes very satisfied when devotees greet other people. Prabhupada doesn't use the word other devotees. He says greets other people. Other people includes devotees and other people with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. So these qualities become so important, and actually in a very subtle way, they help us cross over the ocean of potential dejection and despondency. In a very subtle but very important way. And this is something we should never take for granted, actually. Okay, I'm stopping there first. Now I would like to hear devotees. Yes, Prabhu, please.
So what are the arguments that...
Just hold on, Prabhu. I think the mic needs to be amplified.
So this is one of the arguments that Krishna presents to Arjuna, that for one who's been honored, dishonor is worse than death.
Yes.
So he presents that. But in conjunction to what you were presenting, what I've noticed is often purity is the force. We all accept that. So if my understanding is when I'm speaking to you or someone, that your understanding of Krishna consciousness or whatever, it's kind of a deviation. You might contaminate me, so I don't want to talk to you anymore. So we have that kind of black and white vision,
yes.
Right? Like if you're a Ritvik, for example,
yes.
I can't talk to you. If you're into Gaudiya Math, I can't talk to you. If you're different things, I can't really talk to you because you're going to contaminate me, and it really sometimes ruins relationship because of this kind of, I don't know if you want to call it fanaticism or lack of maturity or what, but it does, I've seen, causes a kind of problem in relationships that you're expressing here today.
Thank you for bringing that up, Prabhu. And I would agree with you, because generally speaking, I've also heard similar sentiments expressed by devotees. And that very often happens also with their parents or within their family units. I don't want to listen to my mother or my father because they speak, mundane things, and they would disrupt the flow of my Krishna consciousness. So I'm just going to draw a hard stop there, and that has disrupted relationships, that has disrupted communities. My personal understanding of Krishna consciousness and the way I've lived it and the way I've learned it from many devotees is to understand that as far as possible, we should avoid items or transactions or issues that may disturb our Krishna consciousness, but we should also accept the fact that we also coexist with other living entities, and that other living entities are not entirely off the beaten track just because they don't have Krishna consciousness. We should also understand that Krishna is in the heart of everyone, because Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. Krishna is Krishna, and love of God is eternally present in every living entity's heart. It's only a question of when that dormance is actually brought forth. If we understand that perspective, there is no compromise to our Krishna consciousness if we are respectful, if we are friendly, if we have to deal with devotees, if we have to deal with living entities in the course of our work, in the course of our family relationship. It will not hurt our Krishna consciousness if we ourselves are on strong grounds of our own faith. But thank you for raising that, Prabhu. I think it's an important thing that has affected the devotee community. In Singapore, we have a Ritvik temple. Singapore was the second place to become Ritvik. That's a position that we are, an achievement that we had. And I remember when the Singapore temple became Ritvik, the devotees' lives all splintered. Everyone just didn't know what to do about things, because everybody looked to the temple president. Many of them had such deep relationship with him because he inspired them so much for so many years. Then they had their gurus also. So what were they supposed to do? But years later, the Ritviks are very much in Singapore. We are very much in Singapore. Many of the devotees have known the Ritvik president for many years. And when sometimes newcomers come to our temple where we are, and they say, oh, we have heard of a temple which has deities and it's in another place, we know it's a Ritvik temple. Do you have the address to it? I actually give them the address. And I tell them, well, that's the temple that you're looking for. They go over there, and in a week's time they would come back. None of them has ever not come back to the temple. And when I asked them, why did you come back? They said the difference was the experience that we actually received in either temple. In this temple, we found that devotees were friendly, they were loving, they were caring for us. In the other temple, when we went there, we found that we were immediately asked to become live members. We were told to make payments. We were told to sponsor this and sponsor that. So, in Singapore, we have lived with the Ritviks for a long time without compromising the fact that our Krishna consciousness has grown, Bhakti distribution has grown, but we haven't condemned them. When the Ritvik temple's president's wife, whom we had known since we were young, had cancer and she was dying, a whole load of us actually went over to the hospital and we did kirtan. We did kirtan for 10 hours and then she left her body. And then after that, we just left and we offered our obeisances and we're back to where we were. So I think it's very important sometimes to be able to have a sense of perspective about how we can grow and coexist without compromising our values. But I think coming to a point where it destroys relationships in the long run may not really help our community, at least from where I have come from in my limited experience. Thank you for the very candid point, Prabhu. Krishnadas Prabhu, please.
Just on that point, Prabhupada often talks about unity and diversity.
Yes, Prabhu.
And I know it's been discussed sometimes how much diversity is too much diversity.
Yeah.
And so
And how much unity is too much bureaucracy?
Yeah. And is it a personal judgment, or is it an institutional judgment, or how do we, gauge what is too much diversity? Like, what is too much diversity for you might not be too much diversity for me.
Very true, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Very quick points on that I can think of. Unity in diversity when it comes to a community, personally, from what I've seen, it has to exist on at least 2 levels. The first is the institutional level. I think the leadership has to be clear in the context of where the community is, what is the structure of the community, the composition of the community, just how much diversity it can actually encourage. So from that institutional level, I think the culture that comes across is, first of all, not to condemn diversity, but to celebrate it. But then at the same time, diversity should never compromise or dilute Krishna consciousness, because sometimes diversity has the habit of doing that too. But at the same time, from a personal level, I think that's another level, as you rightly point out, that's important for devotees. And on a personal level, many of the devotees in the next generation, Prabhu, are not staying in the temple, for example. And most of them are householders, and many of them will come from family backgrounds where the families are pretty tight. And many of them have first, second generation family members that they either have to interact with or they have to continue relationships with. At that point of time, unity and diversity also has a role to play, because there's so many different ways to be Krishna conscious, but we are united in our Krishna consciousness. There are different ways to come to Krishna in the sense of following the bona fide processes of devotional service. I think what's important, for example, at least from my community where I come from and the places where I preach, is to make sure that even for individuals living with their families, living with persons who are not Krishna conscious, they will always have to understand that their unity always lies in the association of devotees, and their diversity is the ability that they bring as individuals into the community. Their strengths, even their weaknesses sometimes, is something that leadership has to acknowledge. And then there's also the question of their relationship with the outer communities, because that can affect the diversity element. They may be united when it means that they should be Krishna conscious, but then the challenge for them is, how diversified do I become when I'm mixing with the society? So these are challenges I think that we have to address. But if we have markers, it's at least a starting point, Prabhu. It's a starting point. But that's a great point. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful class. I just wanted to add to all the points everyone's made so far that, at least in my experience, having relationships with devotees or spiritual people and then family members or non-devotees, it's kind of like, I think of it like a tree growing. Like when our sadhana and our spiritual practice is really new, it's like we're like a little sapling, we're very weak.
Yes.
And if we try to take on helping too many other people,
Yeah.
it's like they kind of trample our tree.
Yes.
And it destroys it, and then we give up on our practice. Or it's like trying to help someone who's drowning, and they pull you in and you drown. For me, I think what's important is when we are in situations like this, we try to synergize and grow stronger as trees, as like a family, like a forest of spiritualists. And then when we're in the regular world, we kind of assess like how strong we are in our sadhana. And if we can't help someone, if someone can climb our tree without it breaking our branches, then okay, let's tolerate this person for a short amount of time. And I think the bottom line is, at one point we were all needy. At one point we all knew nothing, and somebody else reached out their hand to help us. So if we aren't able to do that for someone else, then the lineage is going to break.
Very true. Somebody took a chance on us. Someone took their time. Someone was very patient with us. Each one of us has a story, isn't it? I knew a devotee who was asked by a friend to keep coming to the temple for 7 years straight, and he didn't come. And finally, when he did come to the temple, 2 weeks after that, his friend stopped coming. Don't ask me why, but it just happened. I also know of this boy who used to come to the Singapore temple. He was new, very enthusiastic. And one day I went up to him and I asked him this question. So, Prabhu, what's your motivation for coming? What is it about Krishna consciousness that you like? I'd like to get to know you. He said, I came here because I'm praying to Krishna to get married. And I asked him, okay. He said, because the best place to find a good girl is in the temple. I'm not going to find a girl in a pub, I want to settle down with a girl who's from a temple. So I come here, I'm praying to Jagannath that he will give me a good girl. I said, okay. And then my wife told me that night that she met a new girl who just came. And she had a chat with her. And lo and behold, she said that she was there to find a good husband. And as Krishna would arrange it, or as Providence would see it fit, in 2 weeks they met each other in the temple, got to know each other. In 2 months they were engaged. And 3 months later they were married. And a month later we never saw them again. I guess your point that's really important, Prabhu, is it's very important for us, as you said, to be able to, we want to help everyone, we want to preach Krishna consciousness to everyone as much as we can. But I think we should also be able to know how strong we are. And that's where the more self-sufficient we are because of the association of devotees, the stronger our roots are, the better we will become. I remember a story which is very helpful here. And I think that's really important in Krishna consciousness, this self-sufficiency that you spoke about. There was this wife who stayed with the husband. He had a mother also who was staying around. They didn't get along, the wife and her mother-in-law. And so one day, out of curiosity, she put some food on the table and she asked him this very important question that no husband wants to hear. She said that if I was drowning in the ocean, and I couldn't swim. And your mother was also in the ocean next to me and she couldn't swim. And you had to make a choice, that one choice, and you had no other way to do it. Who would you save? And he replied without hesitation, my mother, of course. And she was very insulted. She said, I'm the one cooking for you, I'm the one serving you, I've been with you all these years. Your mother hardly comes, so why are you doing this? And he told her something which irritated even more. He said, because in this life I only have one mother. And so she got very upset. And so the next day she went to see her friend and she was speaking to her and said, what an ungrateful man he is. And she turned to her friend and said, if you were me and we were in this situation, what would you do? And the friend gave a very interesting answer. I just learned how to swim. Because if I learned how to swim and I'm self-sufficient, I don't need someone to rescue me from a difficult situation. So I think it's the responsibility of all of us as devotees to reach that point where at least we are anchored strong enough so that we become sources of joy and not neglect and disturbance to others. And if we can give something, I think that discrimination faculty, Prabhu, that you're talking about, the ability to be able to preach Krishna consciousness, but the ability to also know that this is as much as I can do, and to ask other devotees to please also come into the picture and assist us in spreading Krishna consciousness. I think that's very important. Thank you, Prabhu. Maybe we can take one more before we end the session. Yes, Prabhu. I have that. I have 2 sessions, so what I'm doing is I'm going to do, I've stopped at 4 or 3, and maybe the next session we'll try to finish the rest if we can. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the nice discourse. So, I have very specific question. My community, specific community, they are meat eaters. They are Hindus but meat eaters. So, when I go to them, sometimes I need to take unoffered vegetarian foods, but unoffered things, and sometimes I feel bad. At one point, I stopped associating them. But that time I realized that if I don't go to them, then I cannot preach to them. They'll keep doing whatever they're doing now. So now I've started going there, but at some point I feel that, okay, my purity has been lost or something, because I'm taking unoffered foods, this kind of stuff. So where to draw the bottom line? If I don't go to them, I cannot preach them. And they are nowhere in the connection of any other devotees. So should I go them, associate them, and try to preach, consider like sacrificing my kind of things I maintain, not taking unoffered foods?
Is this your community or something, Prabhu? Are
Yeah,
you-
yeah. I specifically, I am from Bangladesh, so our Bangladeshi, Canadian Bangladeshi community, they are meat eaters. They are not like Gujaratis who are vegetarians.
Okay.
So that's the challenge I'm facing currently.
Are they related to you or they just...
No, they're just friends.
Okay. Before I say something, I'm going to ask the pioneers and the senior devotees to assist me here. Yes, Prabhu.
Bring your own food.
Bring your own food. I was waiting for that. Anyone else? Lakshmimani Prabhu? Can we pass the mic over? That'll be helpful. Because this is a question that keeps coming up.
Yeah, it comes up a lot, and it doesn't always come up in that particular sphere, but Radhika Raman Prabhu, you know, he's a wonderful devotee. I don't know how many of you know of him, but he's the head of the religious department in a big university, and he just tells people that I can't eat anything that's cooked in a place where meat is prepared. So you can make me a salad, or you can give me fruits, and I'll be happy with that. And as you have to respect them, they also should respect you. And if
Yes.
you stand up to, you know, for what you believe and explain it without any kind of judgmental attitude, then they can be respectful.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Krishnadas Prabhu? Malti Prabhu, I'm very happy to see you. Malti Prabhu, Hare Krishna. So
This is just one of those things that came from memory of the day, prasadam special. Tamal Krishna Goswami. Prabhupada had a big appetite and would take at least 45 minutes to relish prasadam. He often ate alone, chewing with his eyes closed. When we went to India, we got to eat with Prabhupada regularly because we would be invited to the homes of interested Indians. Then all the devotees would sit together with Prabhupada at the head and take prasadam. Prabhupada said, "This is preaching. We make members by eating." When we went to Surat in Gujarat, he made a condition that he would only take prasadam at someone's home if that person became a life member. In 30 days, we made 30 members. It was very nice. Prabhupada trained us how to take prasadam.
Right on point. Prabhu, what do you think? The answer is very clear. Actually, if I may, I think the gist of what has been said by all the devotees here is actually, if we have faith that our values, Krishna consciousness, is pure, it is potent, and it can change the hearts of persons. And if we are not inimical to them, which you are not, because you're going there, making an effort, you're not unfriendly to them, you really mean well to them. But if you, at the same time, your preaching of Krishna consciousness actually enhances Prabhu, when you show them yourself as an example, that this is what I take, and this is what I don't compromise on. By doing that, you're not making yourself as someone very different, because your mood is not there in the way of false prestige. You actually, you want to serve them, but you're actually also not compromising on what you can take and what you can't take. And I have not seen, as Lakshmimani Prabhu pointed out, I've never seen a situation personally where when I've drawn boundaries, clear boundaries, those boundaries have been taken in a negative fashion, when the motive and the mood in which we want to approach a person is actually as sincere as we can for the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Good neighbors build strong fences. It doesn't mean we're not good neighbors, but if we don't have fences sometimes, we are compromising on what we have to. And our purity depends on that so much, Prabhu. Yes. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
There you are. So this is another example of how being in a community, so many potentially difficult situations that we may face can actually be answered and taken care of, because we have a wealth of experience and purity within our communities. It's 4:26. Maybe one more question, one more comment. Yes, Malti Prabhu, please. Can you just pass the mic?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So happy to see you.
Happy to see you too.
Setting beyond where we normally have been meeting,
Yes.
seeing each other.
That is even better.
A quick story about Prabhupada and Prasadam.
Please.
So we were putting together this program in Delhi, and this was at a time when we didn't have much at all. And we were scrambling to make a big presentation to look bigger than we were. And this one family, Vaishnava family, but from like, you'd say the old money, you know.
Yes, yes.
So they were very impressed by Prabhupada, and somehow they were also impressed by our struggles and our endeavors. So they, on the last day, maybe it was the next day after the last day of this series of programs, invited us to their home to have prasadam. And we're in a table, like at this round table, and I'm sitting myself right by Prabhupada, so I could see what was going on and I could hear. We all noticed there was onions in the chickpeas. So we were not eating the chickpeas because there was onions. And then somebody noticed Srila Prabhupada was eating, and they go, Prabhupada, there's onions in there. Onions in the chickpeas. And Prabhupada very beautifully said, I am not eating onions, I am eating chickpeas. But because he did not want to offend this family who had done so much for us. Literally without them, there wouldn't have been a show. So he didn't want to offend them. So certainly if it was me, it would not have happened. But
Yes.
it's a famous story. Giriraj likes to tell that story. We'll have a question. So, in mentioning Srila Prabhupada,
Yes.
nowadays it's common, it's fashionable among certain cliques of people. Some of them live right here in Canada even, you know, to criticize Srila Prabhupada. And I don't even gonna repeat some of the stuff they say. It's just heartbreaking. Former disciples even one former sannyasi. How does that affect you, and how do you devotees handle that?
Personally, Prabhu, it doesn't affect me in the sense of what Prabhupada did, if that's part of the question. Prabhupada is an acharya, is a pure devotee. He would know exactly what to do at exactly the right time. And if he had to do it, that's the level of his spiritual maturity and purity. It never would change his.
It's not his actions that are generally criticized. It's things he has said or written.
Well, if you look at this episode.
And I'm asking the question in case, because I know people get a little confused by this.
Yes. So you're saying that what he has written and what he has done is not in consonance. What he has written, what he has said, right, and what his actions were, for example, in this, are not in consonance.
We know his actions, and so do they.
Yes.
They're stuck on some statements that he has said, either in the books, in conversations, in letters, in lectures.
Well, my only comment is that even from a material perspective, when you want to understand a subject or a personality, even in the most basis of material argument, to take one or two particular areas and zoom in on them and make that the entire personality is already a fallible argument. It wouldn't even stand in the court of law. So how can it stand in the court of the spiritual world?
It's one of the reasons that we put together a bond of love, Srila Prabhupada and his daughters, to show how his actions and his words never caused us to waver at all.
Yes.
And another, you mentioned about law, I will mention, so the law has the scales sometimes, right?
Yes.
So then I say, I can understand your concern, but have you ever considered putting everything that disturbs you on one side of the scale and then put everything else on the other side?
Yes. It's very true. If you look at the scale of what Prabhupada has done, achieved, and given to the world, and if you were to take certain portions of his statements out of context, then it doesn't make sense, because the out of context statements can never, it can never define the personality, the instructions, and the broad-heartedness in which he approached Krishna consciousness and gave it to all of us. It's a very fallible argument. And unfortunately, if I may say something else, such arguments are generally driven by material motives. Prabhupada would use the word in 438 in the purport. He would say that even in a society like Krishna consciousness, there can be quarrels due to leaning to material things. That's how he wrote it. So the moment we lean towards material things and we want to see Prabhupada through material lenses, then inevitably this is what will happen. It's something we should all avoid. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Lakshmi Prabhu.
I was going to say something in relation to the prasadam part of our discussion before. I had an experience where I was traveling with some people and we were given a package from somebody in Toronto actually to deliver to a family in Gujarat that we didn't know at all, but they were related to the people we knew in Toronto. So we brought this package, and then they cooked for us. But when they put everything in a big table, a circular table, and they asked us to go around and just serve ourselves, and I could see that some things were purchased in the market.
Yes.
And I told the people I was with better not to eat the things in the market. We had just arrived in India. And I explained to the lady, I said, we know that you knew what our eating habits are and that you offer and cook in a clean atmosphere. But those people, we don't have any way of knowing what they used or
Yes.
If they offered, if it's clean, anything. And she was actually very flattered, very, very, very pleased that we separated
Yes.
that thing. So it really depends a lot on how you approach it, how you explain it.
Yes, I really think so, Prabhu. That's the key here. And I think at the end of the day, as Vidura showed us with Dhritarashtra's case, if the heart has no motive except to present it as it is, then the potency is not lost. And the objective is achieved. I believe that. Thank you very much for your time. I'm 5 minutes late, I'm sorry. Maharaj, you were so punctual. Raj Vihari Prabhu, you were just as punctual, but I'm sorry I took more time. But thank you so much, because I think it was wonderful to hear so much of contributions. It's a very small part of Bhagavatam. We're done with a few questions. The questions get more interesting as we go along. So let's just see how they are, Krishna willing, sometime, not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.